Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Do the so-called men in black actually exist? If so, are they from the government, some corporate cabal, or from somewhere else? What does it take to receive a visit from one or more of them?
Hello, and welcome to the 253rd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and that was my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. But before we introduce our guests, I don't have to tell you what looms darkly ahead. Okay, I'm never saying that again. And our weekly paranormal contest.
Anyway, last week's question was, where does the lake monster known as Illy live? Carrie from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, got the answer. Lake Iliamna in Alaska.
All right, this week's question is, what was the name of the Shawnee chief whose 18th century curse often gets the blame for weird happenings in the Ohio Valley of the eastern United States? Get it right, and win an autographed copy of Contactees, A History of Alien-Human Interaction by tonight's guest. And call us locally at 401-766-1240 or nationally at 800-449-1240. If nobody gets it before the end of the show and you still think you have a shot, drop a line to me at ben@behindtheparanormal.com.
And we're honored to have as our guest tonight the paranormal renaissance man, Nick Redfern. Nick works full-time as an author, lecturer, and journalist. He writes about a wide variety of unsolved mysteries, including Bigfoot, UFOs, lake monsters like Illy. I don't know if he's written about Illy, but there he is. Alien encounters, the worlds of the supernatural and the paranormal, and government conspiracies and cover-ups. He is a regular contributor to UFO Magazine, Fate Magazine, the Fortean Times, and Paranormal Magazine, and a number of other publications in the U.S. and the U.K. Along with Contactees, the book, Nick's other books include Memoirs of a Monster Hunter. That's last time he was on the show. He talked about that. Final Events, On the Trail of the Saucer Spies, Three Men Seeking Monsters, A Covert Agenda, The FBI Files, Cosmic Crashes, Celebrity Secrets, Body Snatchers in the Desert, Monsters of Texas, Science Fiction Secrets, There's Something in the Woods, and Strange Secrets. Nick, you make me sick. It takes me 5 years to write a book, and you pump these tremendous works out like nothing. Anyway, Nick has appeared on numerous television and radio shows around the world, including MSNBC's Countdown with Keith Olbermann, Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. Nick is the co-host of the weekly paranormal-themed radio show Exploring All Realms. He also heads the American office of the British-based Center for Fortean Zoology, one of the very few full-time groups in the world dedicated to the investigation of cryptids or unknown creatures. Originally from England, Nick lives in Arlington, Texas, with his lovely wife, Dana. His website is www.nickredfern.com.
Nick Redfern, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. You okay? Are you with us, Nick?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Huh.
Can you hear me?
Well, there's sound going through. I can see it.
Hello?
Oh dear. Well, let's push a few buttons here.
Hello? Hello?
In the meantime, as we try to get Nick's audio here, we're going to hopefully have our show about Men in Black. Let me just explain a little bit about what that is. Since, early in the UFO era especially, men in black, people in black suits and ties, very often with sunglasses and hats, supposedly, will vary. Should we call them back?
We'll try. Hello?
Okay, we're going to try to get Nick here. But in the meantime, these are undesirable people who apparently show up, whether they're from the government, some organization, nobody really knows. And what they do is they appear and attempt to dissuade people from talking about their paranormal experiences in general, and particularly UFO experiences. Supposedly they have been seen near major paranormal flaps, such as the so-called Mothman occurrences in the Ohio Valley in the 1960s, when they supposedly sort of fanned out all over the Ohio Valley in cars, black cars, of course, and asked people not to talk about their experiences with this, either with the UFOs that accompanied the phenomenon or with the actual so-called Mothman himself, which was that we've done separate shows on that, and it's quite a bizarre creature. and where they were from. So they very often claim to be from the government. And do we have Nick? Okay. Hello, Nick. Are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I think I heard something.
Hello?
You know, it's really strange. Okay, we're gonna. Is he on the air?
Hello?
Oh, Nick. Yes. Hello. We're searching through the cyber limbo here for you. Okay. Well, we can't hear you on the main speaker, but they can hear him on the air, right? They can, right? Okay. Well, we're gonna make sure that.
But yeah, it wouldn't be going through the headphones if it wasn't on the air.
Okay. Well, we need to hear him too. All right.
I'm still.
Why don't you get us a couple of headsets? Okay. All right, Nick. I'm going to start. We're going to let Ben ask the first question here.
Okay.
Sorry about the confusion, folks.
This is going to be kind of hard to do, but how far back do you trace human/alien contact or human and alien contacts?
Well, I guess in terms of the modern era, we go back to sort of 1947 when the pilot Kenneth Arnold had a famous UFO encounter over Washington State, where he said he saw like a fleet of strange-looking craft that became known as flying saucers. And a lot of people sort of equate flying saucers with beginning in the late 40s, but that's actually not the case. 1 year before the flying saucer wave in 47, there was a huge number of sightings of what became known as ghost rockets all across Scandinavia, like Norway, Sweden and Denmark. And during the Second World War, there were reports of strange objects that used to pace the aircraft that became known as Foo Fighters, which is where the band the Foo Fighters got their name from. And at the latter part of the 1800s, all across America, people were seeing what became known as phantom airships, and nobody could at any point of origin for who was flying them or where they were from. And then, of course, you can go back thousands of years, and the Romans even were talking about seeing so-called flying shields in the sky. So in other words, we can push the barriers back pretty much, across the centuries. It's all kind of dependent on, how much or to what extent people actually interpret these objects or phenomena as UFOs. Somebody else, says it's angels or demons or whatever, So a lot of it's sort of interspersed and tied in with folklore, but people have been seeing strange things in the skies for thousands of years.
Okay. I'm going to take over the question here because we only got one headset here. Anyway, I'm going to ask you, Nick, okay, we have reports of alien contact, as you suggest, going way back, perhaps even to cave paintings, this sort of thing. How far back have there been reports of the so-called men in black? Or were there guys in togas, black togas? I mean, what sort of, how far back does that go?
Well, we don't quite have black togas, but I mean, what is interesting is we go back to sort of the 1600s, when a lot of people back then were sort of practicing alchemy, the whole process of trying to turn base metals into precious metals like gold. The idea was that there were sort of ancient rites and rituals and secrets. If you knew the ways and means of ancient man, etc., that you could actually practice alchemy and turn base metals into very precious ones. And there are actually a number of reports where alchemists said that they were visited, like late at night, and by like a man dressed in black, like a black cloak.
Really? Who
would offer mysterious warnings about not dabbling in things like alchemy, that it would sort of open doorways to the paranormal and things like that. So, they're not quite like today's Men in Black, but, when you get kind of a dark-suited visitor banging on your door at 10 o'clock at night, warning you not to dabble in the paranormal, 500 years ago, for all intents and purposes, that does sound like a modern-day Man in Black, even though the clothing is slightly different.
Well, that happened to me in the seminary, as Men in Black, as it were warning me not to get involved with paranormal. So, anyway, are there people who do the same thing but don't dress in black? But by the same thing, I mean, warn people and turn up from mysterious origins and sort of.
Well, that's a good question, because for the most part, most of the Men in Black literally are Men in Black. Now, there have been some reports where people have turned up in military uniforms and sort of intimidated witnesses, and then when the witness has put a complaint into the Air Force base, or the military base where the person said they came from, sort of Lieutenant Smith or whatever, there's nobody at the base by that name. They've basically, acted as an imposter, of a military officer. Now, those reports are sort of far fewer. Most of the reports are of sort of typical Men in Black. And when I say Men in Black, they're sort of more distinctive than just somebody who happens to wear a black suit. For example, the suits often look sort of cut in the old sort of style of the 40s and 50s. They even today wear the sort of 1940s, 50s era fedora hats that, all the guys used to wear back then. And even, the government people, like the FBI, used to wear those same types of hats as well. But the Men in Black wear them today even. And the weird thing is about, in a lot of Men in Black reports, they look kind of strange as well. They're often very sort of skinny, pale, almost like anemic and anorexic looking. And they don't seem overly conversant with our mannerisms and way of speaking, etc. It's almost that they're sort of, out on a limb when dealing with us, and which has led to some speculation, could they actually be some sort of alien entity themselves, or even like a hybrid, which makes them look sort of semi-human, but with a little bit of subtle camouflage, like the trench coats with the pulled-up collars and the hats pulled down and wrap-around sunglasses, and they just maneuver around at night time. They can kind of, infiltrate us, which sounds kind of an ominous term, but, everything about the Men in Black is ominous.
Well, have there ever been reports of women in black or hermaphrodites in black? Have there ever been other genders?
Yeah. I'm not honestly aware of any hermaphrodites in black. But,
that was a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah. But there have been women in black. I always say to people, there's not enough women in black in ufology, but that's beside the point. But, there have been a number of women in black reports. Okay. Now, again, they are few and far between. But the interesting thing is that they follow the exact same parallels. It's when people are dabbling in ufology and things like this, that they get the same kind of late-night calling. And the interesting thing about the women in black is that they're kind of like the Men in Black, is that, they're not only do they dress in black, but their hair's black. They've got very sort of pale, porcelain white skin, and they seem more enigmatic, whereas the males seem more menacing. So, we don't get as many reports, but the ones we do get are interesting because they don't sound just random anomalous events. They actually just sound like their male counterparts. Okay.
We're going to take a brief break here to work on our technical difficulties. In the meantime, be right back on Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com with our great guest, Nick Redfern. Stay with us.
Hi, Rick Pickard here. The great sounds of rock and roll is back every Sunday from 1 to 4. Memory Lane will be playing songs from the 50s and early 60s. Be part of the great memories and sounds. See you there.
ON Radio, ON Worldwide.
All right, I wanted to remind you, too, of our marvelous sponsor, Amazon Kindle. We are very happy to report that is a tremendous way to read your e-books. If you don't like to take these $4-a-gallon trips to the bookstore, you can get the e-books right over the air, so to speak, right onto the Kindle device, and it's an e-reader, and you can include 4 of my own books on that, including my History of Rhode Island under my historian's hat, Rhode Island: A Genial History, which I wrote with Glenn Laxton of Channel 12, formerly of Channel 12, and also 3 books, of course, on the paranormal. My last, Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny, and The Footsteps in the Attic, and Faces at the Window. Amazon Kindle. Go to Amazon.com or your Amazon.com. I guess that's where you go and get your Kindle. And I think we've got our situation resolved here. And we're very happy to welcome back Nick Redfern for the next part of our show. And Ben is going to take a few more questions here. And now that he's back on.
Why are you giving me this if I have one myself?
Because I'm disheveled and nervous. Okay, very good.
Okay, so who typically gets visits from Men in Black?
Well, primarily it's sort of twofold. If we look at the reports we've got going back to the early 50s, it's either UFO witnesses who've had sort of fairly significant UFO reports, but not always, but for the most part there's something, more than just a light in the sky, abduction stories, contact encounters, that sort of thing. Or it's researchers that are heavily focusing on the Men in Black mystery and who may have interviewed witnesses, and then the phenomenon kind of gets stripped into them. In other words, if you've seen, for the most part, just a light in the sky, or you're just investigating, I don't know, the Roswell story, or one particular type of UFO sighting or crop circles, we don't seem to see too much in terms of interference in those areas. It's almost like when you go on the trail of the Men in Black and the witnesses who have sort of been terrorized by them, then they start impacting on your life as well. So it's almost like you go looking for something and you get what you go looking for.
All right, so what's their typical modus operandi?
Well, for the most part, the Men in Black literally turn up out the blue, or I should say out the black. Most of the encounters that people have reported with Men in Black occur at night. And what generally happens is that, somebody may have had a UFO encounter, a fairly significant one, sort of week or 2 weeks early, or even a couple of days. In some cases, they've only told close friends. They've not told any UFO groups, just family and friends. Haven't told the media or anybody like that, or the police. And yet somehow the Men in Black seem to know. And what usually happens is, there'll be like a knock on the door at 10:30 at night. And of course, most people, you don't get a knock on the door like your average Tuesday night, and if you do, people probably think, oh my God, it's the police, bad news, something's happened to somebody. And so they rush to open the door, and then they find very often a trio of Men in Black. For some weird reason, they often travel in threes. And what basically happens is, they just stand there enigmatically saying, Mr. Smith, we'd like to talk to you about your strange experience of 2 weeks ago, or we understand you have something you want to tell us. And what's weird is that they stand there and won't come in until they're invited, which has sort of led some people to draw parallels between a lot of the old vampire legends of how the vampire, can't enter your home until you're invited in. Mm-hmm. And what's very strange is that in many of the cases, it's like common sense goes totally out of the window. It's kind of like if somebody turned up on your doorstep, 3 guys dressed in black suits and fedoras and pale as a ghost, and said, we'd like to come in and talk about your UFO encounter, you'd probably either shut the door or, you'd shut the door and lock the door. I think most people would.
Or at least ask for some ID.
Yeah, or ask for some ID. But that's what happens. It's like logic goes out the window, and it's almost as if, as strange as it sounds, the MIB have the ability to sort of hold sway over the logical part of the person's brain. And they just invite them in, and they invite them to sit down, and, they sit there and they put up with all this intimidation and veiled threats that, we'd rather you didn't talk about your UFO encounter because, brakes sometimes fail on cars. That's literally the sort of veiled comments they come out with, sort of a semi-threat that you can interpret in various ways. And, they'll question the witness, and the witness just spills the beans. And then the Men in Black, they don't even thank them. They just kind of look enigmatically at them as if they're just taking notes in their mind. Then just suddenly stand up at some point, even perhaps in the middle of when the person's speaking, just stand up, say thank you, and they just leave as weirdly as they arrive. And then the person, it's like common sense kicks back in. It's like, why did I let those people in? Why did I let them just sit down? I didn't ask for any identification. I just told them everything that happened, and I just let them go. And then the person, when common sense really comes back to them, they race to the door, they open the door, there's no sign of a car in the street, they don't see the guys walking down the road or anything like that. It's almost as like they've sort of manifested outside the front door and then vanished the moment they left the front door. And those aspects are also typical, the weird circumstances of the interview and the sort of overwhelming elusiveness of the Men in Black when they just seem to keep vanishing like the blink of an eye.
Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, okay. So, are you aware of people having repeated visits from the Men in Black?
Actually, that's an interesting question. For the most part, we don't. For the most part, it's a one-off, but it's often so traumatic for the witness that very often it leads them to leave the UFO research community. If they're a witness who's thinking about speaking to people, they stay away from it. Now, there have been a couple of cases of researchers, one of the most famous being a man named Albert Bender, who was one of the early UFO researchers in 1950s America, sort of 1950-53. And he delved very deeply into the Men in Black mystery because he got a visit from them, he said. But what was interesting is that in the build-up to Bender's experience with these three guys, which looked like the classic weird Men in Black, he said in sort of weeks leading up to it, he would go out at night into town. He lived in a town called Bridgeport, Connecticut. And he said he would see these sort of shadowy, almost like wraith-like black-dressed figures with glowing eyes that seemed to be watching him and pursuing him and taunting him almost. So they didn't sound anything like government agents. They were more like paranormal entities. And he said they manifested in his house even on several occasions to the point where he eventually just quit research. He literally just quit it, didn't come back, and closed his group down and just turned his back on the entire UFO subject. And but if you read Bender's story of these sort of multiple encounters, not a single one sounds like the FBI or the CIA. I mean, it actually sounds like almost like demonic is how some people have described Bender's experiences.
It's interesting that you mentioned Bridgeport, Connecticut. That's where I had my second worst poltergeist case of my 40-year career in 1974.
Oh, well, that's interesting because Bender himself was obsessed with the occult. And he his UFO research went alongside in tandem with his paranormal research. He was heavily into the occult, Ouija boards, things like that. And some people speculate on the idea that, the UFO phenomenon has paranormal rather than an alien origin. Some people suspect, when people like Bender, you go dabbling in the occult, it perhaps opens a doorway to a realm that some people think is literally extraterrestrial, but that may be far more negative and supernatural. And that's what a lot of people do think about Bender's experience. That it had nothing to do with the government, but he opened some sort of portal to a far more negative paranormal realm.
Well, that's funny because we are among the few. Most people who investigate these things investigate just UFOs or just ghosts or just this. You know what I'm saying? They aren't pan paranormal, so to speak.
Yeah.
We do that. We are pan paranormal, and the parallels we run into are mind wrenching, really. And you've begun to point that out. Well, perhaps we can get into that more as we go.
Sure, yeah.
Now, I've always been struck by John Keel's descriptions of the Men in Black who reportedly turned up in West Virginia after and during the Mothman flap of the 60s that we mentioned at the beginning of the show. There were reports, as you mentioned, of people in Air Force uniforms who were wearing their insignia wrong, or more typical Men in Black who seemed unfamiliar with English or with simple customs such as shaking hands. Now, granted that Keel admitted exaggerating some of that, but have you run into similar reports of these Men in Black characteristics?
Well, yeah, I mean, some people have drawn parallels, and I think they're very valid parallels between the Men in Black and some of the characteristics of the so-called shadow people. Where people have had sort of bedroom encounters, they've woken up in the middle of the night, unable to move, and feeling a threatening presence in the room, which is essentially, the medical term or the medical diagnosis is sleep paralysis, the idea that you're in sort of a semi-sleep, semi-awake state, and it provokes all sorts of imagery in the mind, and the body's unable to move properly. And then when you sort of force yourself, you wake up and this image is gone. And some psychiatrists, psychologists, etc., will say it's just like an aberration and a misfiring of the brain between the waking and sleeping state. But I think there's actually far more to it than that. I think potentially the sleep state or the dream state can open us up to sort of other portals or realms that can interact with us in some respects. And if you look at a lot of the shadow people reports, they're described, the way they describe them is kind of like a shadowy black figure, sometimes one-dimensional, but sometimes they even wear the hat, because there's actually one category of shadow people that is known as the Hat Man. And people all around the world have described, wake up in the middle of the night in this shadowy form wearing a hat. Now, this sounds far more like Albert Bender's Men in Black than it does, say, the Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones Men in Black of the movie.
Of course, yes.
Totally different. So you see characteristics there. We also, as I said, have the characteristics of vampire stories about the Men in Black not coming in your house until they get the invite. And there are a lot of stories where not just Albert Bender's, but people who were using Ouija boards had Men in Black encounters and experiences. I think I include in the book something like 4 or 5 people who fell into that exact category.
Interesting.
And again, I think there's something to be learned from that, a lot of sort of straightforward nuts and bolts UFO researchers don't like delving with the paranormal angle. They think it affects their credibility, I think. But, I don't personally care about credibility. I go with the evidence. And if the evidence suggests that people who are dabbling in the occult seem more likely to have Men in Black experiences, then we need to let people know that we're obviously otherwise looking in the wrong direction, or we're not seeing the full picture, and to ignore this data because it doesn't fit in with the more comfortable, they're all secret agents angle. We're doing a disservice to everybody if we don't present the other side of the coin as well.
Well put. I certainly agree with that point of view. Your point about sleep paralysis is very interesting, because I often wonder if the condition is not invented to explain the phenomenon. In days of yore, when I was a graduate student, back when Triceratops was grazing on the town green, I was working in psychiatric hospitals and would often encounter people with psychoses, particularly schizophrenia, who just apparently were, in every bit of opinion I could muster, were experiencing real worlds that we were not.
Yeah.
And this sort of thing, and of course you can't mention that because you'll lose your job if you happen to be in that field, but in any case, one does wonder which end of the horse is guiding the cart, so to speak. All right, so there are also reports from the Mothman period of Men in Black asking to keep simple items like ashtrays and pens as if they were valuable artifacts. Have you heard other reports of this kind?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of stories like this where, the Men in Black act in the strangest ways. I mean, you point this out in respect of Mothman. Mothman was seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia area from the mid-60s to about 67, for the most part, when the town Silver Bridge crashed into the Ohio River, drowning dozens of people whose cars were on the bridge at the time. And, various people have suggested that either Mothman caused the disaster, or Mothman was some sort of warning entity that turns up when disasters are looming and tries to warn people. That's the reason for its presence. But, whatever the reason, Mothman, this sort of glowing-eyed, bat-winged nightmare, basically, as some people describe it, others as more like a saving entity, was present in the same location where the Men in Black was seen. And again, when witnesses to Mothman, were interviewed by the Men in Black, again they get these sort of late-night calls, the Men in Black would ask the most weird questions. Nothing to do, very often, with the encounters. They just go off at a tangent, and they would always want to take a little souvenir with them, like a pen, or a button off the table. Somebody saw the Man in Black when she was in the kitchen. She was going to make a drink, and he picked a little button off the table and quickly put it in his pocket and smiled to himself. And what's interesting is that you can go back in folklore and find, for example, from fairy lore in England and fairy folklore, where, they would visit people in the middle of the night. When I say fairies, I'm not talking about the image that we have today of, sort of little female figures with wings. Back then, fairies were, sort of shape-shifting entities that could be as malevolent as they could be benevolent. And they would they would help people sometimes, but if you sort of crossed a fairy or a goblin, they would turn the tables on you. And one of their big fascinations was to steal. They were like tricksters. They would steal something from the home of the person, even if they were helping them. And there's a lot of weird stories like that with the Men in Black just taking the most weird little objects, but feeling massively satisfied in the same process as well.
Well, obviously, the implication here is that these events occur all over the world, not just in the United States or Britain. In the Men in Black experiences, yeah. So
yeah, I mean, in the book, I think I've got cases from Australia, England, America, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and one or two other countries as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what's the wildest MIB story you've heard?
Well, I mean, I would have to say it actually sort of ties in with what we've already sort of talked about. I mean, one of the stories was one that I got from Brad Steiger. I interviewed a lot of people for the book who were around in the early years of Men in Black research, sort of the 50s and 60s onwards. And Brad told me a lot of stories about the Men in Black, and he told me how, on one occasion, when in the 60s became friends with John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecies book. And Keel, in his book, focused to a big degree on the Men in Black. And, people, well, why did he focus so much? Why was he fascinated? I think a good clue came from the interview that I did with Brad. And Brad said, well, Keel's dead now, but I still don't feel 100% comfortable about talking about this. But Keel told me, so I'll tell you. And Brad said that one night he was having dinner with Keel, and, Keel was sort of really kind of spooked out and concerned, and basically, wanted to spill the beans on something that had happened to him. And to do with the Men in Black, and he said that at the height of his research, things like Mothman, UFOs, and Men in Black, and recognising there were these crossovers with other areas as well. He said there was this sort of weird manifestation in his living room where literally 3 Men in Black came in the house. Now, when I say came in the house, I don't mean knocked on the door and came in. I mean literally sort of manifested through the woodwork of the door, kind of like semi-spectral, and then became fully formed in the room. And, I said to Brad, was he yanking your chain? And Brad said no. He said, he was absolutely terror-stricken, basically, scared out of his wits by this experience, and had no way to sort of reconcile it. It was like the encounters had sort of followed on from the fact that Keel had been looking into these things, and the more he looked, then the MIB kind of turned the tables on him and literally sort of appeared in the room and then vanished again. And I think that's probably one of the wildest ones, because it comes from a very respectable researcher and author, Brad Steiger, who got it from, the equally respectable John Keel. And, it's one of those little-known stories that, or hardly known at all, I think, that Keel actually had this personal experience, which, for me at least, was certainly one of the wildest, to have an author like Keel actually saying, I saw them, but they weren't guys, from the Air Force. They literally just, almost like the Transformer of Star Trek or whatever, they were here, materialized, and then gone again.
Have you yourself ever had a Men in Black experience or seen them or anything like that?
No, I mean, a lot of people ask me that, and I haven't. But what I have had is a lot of experiences where people, they might contact me with a case and a story, and, I might be on the road, I do a lot of travelling and lecturing, and I'll check email and say, I'll be back in 5 days, can I give you a call and we'll do an interview? They say, sure. Then when I get back home and give them a call, their entire personalities change. They're deeply reluctant to speak about what occurred, don't want to go on the record or even off the record. And I've asked, what's wrong? And they said, well, in that intervening 5 days, I got this weird call at midnight, I raced to the phone in case it's bad news, and it was a voice sort of vaguely, saying, don't talk about UFOs. We understand you had an unusual experience. Please keep it to yourself, and the phone goes dead. Now, over the course of about 15 years, I would say that's happened on probably about 15 or 16 occasions, so not a large amount, but there's been that distinct pattern every time where, I've gone to do an interview, and, obviously it doesn't happen in the majority of interviews. I've done hundreds of interviews over the years, but there've been enough for me to see that there's some sort of pattern going on. And telephone interference is a classic aspect of numerous Men in Black accounts. People have heard weird electrical cracklings on the phone, strange voices, backwards voices, all sorts of things like that.
Okay. Ben's got another question.
Okay, so during the Rendlesham Forest incidents in England about 30 years ago, several of the Air Force guys said that they got a clear message that these were time travelers, not aliens. Could the same be true for Men in Black?
Yeah, this is one of the more intriguing theories of the MIB that I cover quite a bit in the book. I've got a whole chapter on it. The idea that, that the Men in Black literally are men, but, they're not men from our time frame. Now, of course, much of this to a degree is dependent on, whether or not time travel is actually feasible or whether it's theoretical. It's difficult to sort of prove there are time travelers coming here. It's difficult to prove, that the present we're living in isn't the remote past to somebody else, thousands of years ahead. But one of the people I interviewed about this theory was a man named Joshua Warren. Josh lives in North Carolina, and he's a paranormal expert, having written a lot of books on ghosts and supernatural phenomena. And Josh sort of asked the question, why do they wear black suits? Why do they always wear the black suits and the fedoras and drive the old cars? The hats and the cars particularly always seem out of time. Even today, people report the Men in Black driving like 1950s Lincolns and old Chevys and things like that. But they look brand new. So it's everything about the Men in Black kind of screams out of time. And Josh speculated on the idea that, if you're a time traveler from the future and you want to come back to 2011, and then you go back to 1985, then 1960, then 1940, then back up to 1959, say, then back to 1931, you're going to need a mode of clothing that is not going to stand out in all of those eras. It's like you can't go back to 1920 and wear combat boots and a Nirvana T-shirt, you know what I mean? But you could conceivably wear the black suit.
Yes, true.
And get away with it throughout every time frame in the modern era. And possibly, in centuries ago, you wouldn't have to change the mode of dress too much from, the old alchemists who were seeing the black cloak, Men in Black. People wore cloaks back in the 17, 1800s. So, just kind of speculate that maybe in the future somebody has an awareness of our modes of transport, of dress, but perhaps, the future's so, or our present, if you like, is so fragmented in the future that they occasionally get the decades wrong or whatever. So, the fashions of the 70s, they wear them, and when they turn up in the 60s or the 80s or vice versa or whatever. So, but it's an interesting theory because, it would explain why they're always out of fashion, why the cars aren't quite right for this year or that year,
All right. Well, I want to stop here for a moment. Because, as you've been on the show before, the hour goes quickly, and there's sometimes just no time. I want to give you a chance to talk about the book Contactees and your other books and your website as well, without having to rush.
All right. How long do we have?
No. We have another 20 minutes, but I just, I've learned from from experience that we need to give the guest a chance to talk about that in the middle of the show.
Well, people can reach me either at nickredfern.com or nickredfernbooks.blogspot.com, and I always try and get back to people within 24 hours if they've got questions or emails, rather than keep them hanging on. And the other book you mentioned, Contactees, that was a book I had out in 2009, and that's a study of people who claim face-to-face contact and interaction with very human-looking aliens that became known as the Space Brothers. And again, that was a phenomenon that largely kicked off in the 50s. But, you can argue that some earlier cases that have sort of, more mystical aspects to them do sound like Men in Black encounters, like Contactee encounters as well.
Okay, very good. Okay, excellent. And Ben will continue with our questions.
Okay. So everybody knows about the movie that was called Men in Black, even though it had nothing to do with anything that we're talking about tonight. Do you feel like that's sort of like a disinformation thing rather than a joke?
The films? Yeah.
Well, personally I don't. No, but I mean, what I do think is that it doesn't accurately portray the whole phenomenon.
Sure, hope not.
No. I mean, in the film, they're just regular guys who have to work for a secret agency. In reality, most of them, as I said, look very weird. But in saying that, I do think, in fact, I know through some of the files that we've got hold of now and the witness testimony, there's very little doubt that there is sort of another arm of the MIB, which probably are government people. And I think sometimes they might even exploit the weirder mythology as a means to sort of camouflage their activity. It's like if you're in the government and you want to silence someone about UFOs, you don't turn up in your military uniform, flash your ID card. Maybe they really do get the guys to dress up in the black suits, and so they know that the witness is going to be laughed at if they talk about it, or they won't even talk about it. So I think, for the most part, they're kind of strange here, but there is a government side of it as well, and I think the government, particularly in the 50s, they did dress the way the Men in Black dress, the hats and the black suits, particularly the FBI, when they would go out on investigations, etc. So I think, there's at least two sides of the coin, the paranormal angle, the government angle. It could be the time travel angle. We could be looking at, when people say to me, who are the Men in Black, it's almost like you have to answer, well, which category of Men in Black are you talking about?
So do you feel like they could be working together with the government, or is it a completely separate entity?
I think for the most part, I think it's separate. Now, one of the things that I would say, what's interesting is, we think, a lot of UFO researchers think of the Men in Black, they come from the government, and it's part of some super secret project. Well, a few years ago, the Air Force declassified the US Air Force declassified a whole batch of files on UFOs, and tucked away in one of them was an intelligence document that was circulated throughout the entire Air Force. And it was a memoranda saying reports have reached us about men disguising themselves as military personnel or dressing in black suits and going around intimidating and silencing alleged UFO witnesses in the US. Can you please keep a lookout, because we want to try and catch one of these people and find out who they are and what they want. So in other words, the irony is, we all think the governments are the men in black, and then we find documents where the governments are saying, who are the men in black? We want to try and get hold of them. So that was sort of eye-opening in the sense that it demonstrates that for the most part they have nothing to do with the government. But it also, I think, demonstrates to me that there seems to not be a direct connection in terms of working together, that maybe that has happened to a small degree, but for the most part it's almost like the government are as much in the dark as we are.
Well, that leads to, I suppose, the biggest question of all. Regardless of who this is, what this is, what's the point?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that is the big question. It's not, nobody ever rarely gets, killed or anything like that, but there is a lot of intimidation to the point where the person leaves the subject because, it's kind of like the MIB will add 2 and 2 and make 5. It's like the person realizes there's a threat or a veiled threat, but then they get so stressed and worried that, that veiled threat becomes, a threat of death or whatever, and they just leave the subject. So part of it seems to be intimidation to get certain people to leave the subject, and yet it doesn't happen all the time. There's no real evidence that sort of the more significant research into Roswell have ever been threatened by the MIB, and yet Roswell is arguably one of the most famous cases of all. It seems the weirder UFO cases are the ones that attract the MIB when it comes to silencing people. So I think silencing, intimidation are the main roles, but it's what are they silencing us about, and what is the intimidation for? I think to a great extent it has to be, when people are getting close to the secret behind what lies at the heart of UFOs, and that's what I would say. I don't think, because it doesn't necessarily always relate to one significant case, like Roswell. I think it's when people are looking at some of the more alternative areas. That's where I think we might find the truth of what's really going on. And you often find it's people like John Keel and Albert Bender who were sort of looking into the paranormal tie-ins and things like that. It was always those sorts of people who kind of got the stranger visits or the stranger reports of, that were tied in with them as well. And so I think we need to look at that issue for the answers to why the MIB appear. It's not just every nuts and bolts sighting or light in the sky. It's when people are making these parallels with Ouija boards, poltergeist activity. That's sort of another aspect of a lot of Men in Black stories. 2 or 3 days later, there'll be an outbreak of poltergeist activity in the house. And I think it's these sorts of things they're trying to keep under wraps.
Well, you've led right into the next question, which is have other forms of paranormal activity accompanied visitations by these, whatever they may be. Certainly you mentioned Ouija boards on several occasions, and certainly I'd say probably 60 to 70% of my cases previously, and now our cases, have something to do with people using Ouija boards. And we just took on a case right now locally in which someone said that the previous occupant of this particular apartment had been using Ouija boards, and of course that's a big red flag for us. So that's a significant point. Are you aware of any cases in which Men in Black have harmed the people they're visiting, particularly investigators?
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, it's difficult to say because there have been cases where people have been visited and then sort of 2 months later they've dropped dead of a heart attack or whatever. Now, if they hadn't been visited, no one would make the connection. But because people have made the connection. But it's kind of like, is there a connection because we can make the connection, or are people just making the connection because they know they were visited? You see what I mean?
Yes.
It's difficult to say, if we're sort of making strands where strands don't exist. But there's no real evidence of anybody actually outright murdered. What I will say is that a lot of people who had Men in Black experiences, particularly those who've had sort of the poltergeist activity, a lot of them have reported sort of very bad ill health in the immediate aftermath, like physical health, mental health, psychological health problems, sort of rampant paranoia, depression, just pulverizing migraines.
Seen that ourselves.
All that sort of thing. Rashes over the body. And a lot of people also had sort of really bad run-ins of bad luck, to the point where it just seems, you just wouldn't expect. The refrigerator blows up, then the oven stops working, then the electric keeps going out, and somebody has a car accident, somebody else gets whatever, and it's like something, they've opened a door to something, and it's like, well, you're now going to get what you asked for. It's just like they just get hit, and we get that a lot in MIB cases. And my argument is, if this is just government agents, or even just something extraterrestrial and nothing else, I don't think we'd have all these weird spin-offs of, just bad luck, poltergeist stuff going on. And, it seems that there's more going on where the UFO phenomenon may not be what many people think it is. It could well be deeply tied in with the paranormal somehow.
Absolutely. Well, much of what you say and much of what others have said on this subject has what we call parasites written all over it. Parasitical entities that we run into in our work, and as I say, cross-reference to other areas of the paranormal. On the issue of black cars, which these supposedly are driving, has anyone ever followed either the men in black or the black cars or whatever conveyance they may be using?
Yeah, they have. And I mean, what's interesting in some cases, people have even got the license plates of them, and when they've checked, checks have actually been done with the police, and there's no such license plates anywhere in the US. And some researchers have pointed out that's very weird, because what are the chances, of coming up with a six-figure or six-letter and number license plate, and it actually not really existing? You know what I mean? There's only a certain number of numbers and letters you can combine. You would think of all the millions of the cars in the US, how extraordinary it is that on every single occasion the MIB choose license plates that really don't exist. You think occasionally they just pick one at random, and it really would exist, whether in this state or that state or whatever, but it never does. There are even reports of the black cars literally dematerializing as if they're like a hologram almost, rather than having any substance to them. There's several famous cases that fall into that exact category from the US and from Britain. And again, there's just no way to sort of rationalize that in normal terms.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead, Ben.
All right, so is there any connection between the Men in Black and the sightings of black helicopters?
Well, some people kind of suggest, with the government angle, that's sort of more like a modern-day incarnation, that maybe the government people, when they would trudge around on foot in cars in the 50s and 60s, now it's more sophisticated. It's down to sort of like telephone and email monitoring, and surveillance of people's populated areas with these so-called black helicopters. It could be sort of a spin-off, in terms of the technology. But in saying that, there are also some black helicopter reports where people have said they've just vanished. They don't sound very often like normal helicopters. It's almost like, is the old 1950s black car, has that motif been upgraded to the present day? And we're still seeing that something that's sort of semi-holographic, if you like.
Well, true. There's another question that might take us a little deeper into this, odd as that may be as a destination, because it's a very strange subject anyway. We had a guest who was describing a Mothman experience he experienced as a boy with his family, and he said that the experience, unlike those of many other people, was a very positive one. His encounter with Mothman led to a change in his life, so that he all of a sudden was getting high marks in school. He developed musical talent that he never had before, and all sorts of wonderful things happened to him. And today he's an accomplished artist and things of this kind. Have you ever heard of the Men in Black experience being a life-changing experience in general, or a positive experience in particular?
Well, certainly life-changing, but always from a negative perspective.
I see.
Now, in terms of, because I said it provokes very often like paranoia and obsession and things like that, there are some cases where, researchers have wanted to learn more about the subject when they've looked into the phenomenon, or people who've had that experience where they haven't been overly intimidated and they've looked into it more, and, that they've gone on to write books, etc. So you could argue that's a positive thing. But on the other hand, for the most part, no, that doesn't happen. And when it does, it's more just down to the person deciding to look into it more, rather than the MIB encouraging them to do it, so to speak.
All right. So, any connection with cattle mutilations?
Only there are, but kind of like with the Mothman story, the locations. There are some MIB reports from the same locations where there have been cattle mutilations. For example, in the 1970s, mid-70s, there was a huge wave of cattle mutilations in and around the town of Dulce, New Mexico, northern New Mexico. And there were a lot of MIB reports from that same area, very sort of strange reports of these sort of black-suited characters roaming around the roads at night, wandering around and kind of staring in people's windows, things like that. So, we have a connection again, clearly, like with the Mothman stuff. What the connection is, I'd be lying if I said I knew. We can speculate endlessly, but it seems, where there's weird phenomena, not just UFO sightings, the MIB turn up as well.
Well, it's interesting that not to put too fine a point on it, when we welcome guests such as yourself, we often have a lot of strange things that happen to Ben and I, even at our home, not inside, but because we're pretty well protected. But we have people coming to the door who claim to be from the utility company, and they aren't, because we check. There are not so much black vehicles as white vehicles, which is odd, like the vans and things sitting outside the house and all this business. Oh, yeah. And maybe we're paranoid, but I think that given some of the things that have happened, we have every right to be. Yeah. But again, we have never had a classic Men in Black experience that I'm aware of, except in dealing with parasitical entities, I suppose, from the point of view in which we do that, which is rather unusual. And be that as it may, a lot of people have mentioned that the UFO phenomenon has been evolving over particularly the last 20 years, from metallic craft to very often these days simply what are known as orbs or just lights, this sort of thing. Has the Men in Black phenomenon evolved accordingly? But it doesn't sound as though it has. It still sounds as though they're Men in Black.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That's one of the interesting things. That's why I think the phenomenon isn't what it appears to be, because you go back to the 50s and 40s, we had reports of flying saucers, black flying triangles. The appearance of the entities has changed from long-haired space brothers to somewhat less human-like, and then today they're sort of little spindly greys. Abductions are more prevalent than contact cases were in the past. So it's almost like the phenomena changes to suit the sort of expectations of people in the period, which leads me to believe the real nature of the phenomenon is camouflaging itself from us, that we may never have seen it in its real form. But the MIB, they seem to be sort of ever-present and just unchanging, as long as the styles are pretty much in tune with what they're wearing, they don't change.
Well, very good. Nick, I want to thank you for a great show. We're sorry about the technical difficulties coming up, and we're going to have you on again to see what you're working on, and we encourage people to go to your website, nickredfern.com, and check out his books. Nick Redfern, folks, and thank you again, Nick.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
You are most welcome.
Couple of announcements. Our good friend Albert Rosales, the special subjects reporter for this show and keeper of the world's largest database of humanoid sightings, is offering for sale a CD with the latest updates and summaries of sightings from ancient times up to 2009. Albert is very thorough and puts a tremendous amount of work into this. CDs are organized by decade and include original images, comments, links, anecdotes, and more. All cases up to 1900 are on a CD for $50. 1900 to 1910, it's $25. 1910 to 1939, $30. And every decade, 1940 and on, $25 each. For details, drop Albert a note at alberthumanoid@gmail.com. And Albert, I can tell you, is much more than a humanoid. He's a true gentleman and a really, really fine researcher. Okay. Check our websites, behindtheparanormal.com and newenglandghosts.com. You can get my books there. You can subscribe to our newsletter. And my books, by the way, despite the fact that we're sponsored by Amazon Kindle, are also available on Barnes & Noble Nook e-reader device. You didn't hear that from me. And you can also apply to become a reporter for the show.
All right, so all of our podcasts are available at our show website, www.behindtheparanormal.com, and yes, they are free.
So many thanks to our producer, Steve Bianchi. And we'll be enjoying the 4th of July holiday weekend next weekend, so the show will be a rebroadcast here on WON 1240 AM and ONworldwide.com. But the following week, July 11th, We'll welcome a very distinguished guest, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, Canada's former Minister of National Defense and an outspoken advocate of UFO disclosure.
All right, in the meantime, tune into our Sunday evening CBS Radio edition in Boston, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Seattle, and online at www.newskyradio.com. On July 3rd, the show will be a rebroadcast, but on July 10th, my dad and I will take an hour to talk about what are ghosts.
And in the meantime, we leave you with a quote from that old darling Albert Einstein. Quote, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them."
Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.